The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion and welcome to a world where love is written anew. The night was quiet in London, the kind of quiet that comes only after great storms, when the world holds its breath, unsure whether it can trust the calm. The war had ended 2 years ago, but for Hermione Granger, peace still felt like a fragile spell, one that could shatter at the slightest touch. She walked briskly down the corridor of the Ministry of Magic, her wand tucked into her sleeve, a stack of parchment clutched to her chest. The gas lamps hummed softly, their golden light spilling over walls newly repaired after the chaos of Voldemort's fall. The ministry had changed, portraits replaced, departments reorganized, corruption painstakingly uprooted. And yet, every so often, she still felt the ghost of fear in these halls, like an echo lingering from darker times. Hermione was now a senior investigator in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a role she had earned not through privilege, but through relentless work and an unyielding belief that the world could and must be better. She had thought, at first, that the post-war years would be about rebuilding, but the truth was far messier. Shadows still crept in places light could not reach. Dark objects resurfaced from old vaults, and whispers of allegiance stirred in corners where trust had not yet taken root. She turned into the main briefing room and paused. A tall wizard stood by the window, pale and silent, dressed immaculately in grey robes. For a fleeting moment, she thought she'd entered the wrong room. Then he turned, and grey met brown. "Granger," he said, his voice lower, rougher than she remembered. "Malfoy," she replied evenly, though her pulse quickened despite herself. The name alone carried years of memory. Corridors at Hogwarts, cruel laughter, the sharp divide between everything they'd once been. Draco Malfoy looked older now, the sharpness in his features tempered by something quieter, heavier. His eyes, once bright with arrogance, had dulled like tarnished silver. She forced herself to step forward. "You're my new partner?" "Apparently." He set his hands behind his back, straightening as if bracing for her judgment. "It wasn't my idea." Hermione exhaled through her nose. "Nor mine." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history. The head of the department, Kingsley Shacklebolt, entered a moment later, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Good. You're both here." He gave each of them a firm, assessing look. "I'll be direct. We've had a surge in recovered artifacts from the war, cursed items, family heirlooms with traces of dark enchantments. Some have turned up in Muggle areas. We need someone who understands both the old magic and how to deal with it responsibly. That's you, Granger." "And me?" Draco asked quietly. Kingsley's eyes softened slightly. "You, Malfoy, understand the people who once dealt in such things. You know the patterns, the families, the silences. You're on probation still, but I believe you can be of use." Draco's jaw tightened. Hermione glanced at him. She recognized that look. Pride, barely held in check. Kingsley slid a file across the table. "Your first case is in Nocturne Alley, a set of cursed amulets recently sold to a Muggle-born trader. 2 people are in St. Mungo's already, suffering from magical poisoning. Find out where they came from And who's moving them? Hermione nodded sharply. Understood. Draco gave a curt nod as well, but his voice held a trace of something weary. We'll handle it. As Kingsley left, the silence between them returned, thick with everything neither could say. Hermione picked up the file and flipped it open. The parchment smelled faintly of ink and smoke. She looked up. I don't expect this to be easy, she said quietly. But I do expect honesty. We're working for the same side now, Malfoy. Let's not forget that. He met her gaze, and for the first time something flickered behind his eyes. A tired, almost self-mocking sort of understanding. You think I could forget? Believe me, Granger, I've spent 2 years trying not to. They left the ministry together, their footsteps echoing down the long marble corridor. Outside, the night was damp and cold, the city lights blurred by mist. They apparated to Nocturne Alley, landing in the shadowed street where once, years ago, Draco had walked with arrogance and Hermione with fear. Now they stood side by side, two survivors of a world that had burned and been rebuilt in their wake. The shop they sought was small, nearly hidden between taller buildings. Its sign read, "The Silver Thread." The door creaked as they entered. Shelves of trinkets lined the narrow room, and the air smelled of dust and faint decay. Behind the counter stood a nervous witch with wild hair and ink-stained fingers. "Department of Magical Law Enforcement," Hermione said briskly, flashing her badge. "We're investigating the amulet incidents." The witch wrung her hands. I didn't know they were cursed. They came from a private collection. I bought them cheap after the war. The seller said they were clean." "Who was the seller?" Draco asked softly, his tone even but edged. She hesitated. Didn't give a name. But he had a tattoo on his wrist. Looked burned, like it had been removed. Hermione's eyes met Draco's. The same thought struck both of them. An ex-Death Eater. Draco's face was unreadable. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't leave town." Outside, the mist had thickened. Hermione pulled her cloak tighter. "So," she said, "someone's trafficking old dark items, and they're clever enough to cover their tracks. You think it's one of yours?" Draco's voice was calm, but cold. "They're not mine." Hermione looked at him, searching his face. "You know what I mean." He sighed. "Yes, I do, and that's what worries me." For a long moment they stood there, the fog curling around them like smoke from an old fire. The world felt balanced on a knife's edge again, between what was past and what was still to come. Hermione finally said, "We'll start early tomorrow. The artifacts, the cellar, everything." Draco nodded. "Fine." But as they turned away, Hermione couldn't shake the feeling that their first case together would lead them deeper than either imagined, into the shadows of the war they thought they'd left behind, and into something far more dangerous. The possibility of understanding each other. And perhaps, beneath all the ash, the faintest glimmer of silver. The morning after their first investigation dawned pale and grey, with a soft drizzle misting the cobblestones outside the ministry. Hermione arrived early, as she always did, with a stack of files tucked neatly under her arm, and the faint scent of peppermint tea clinging to her robes. She had barely taken a sip before the door opened behind her. "Granger," came a voice, smooth, controlled, but unmistakably tired. She looked up. Draco Malfoy stood in the doorway, his blonde hair damp from the rain, a rolled parchment in his hand. He wasn't wearing his old haughty smirk anymore. There was something quieter about him now, as if the world had stripped him of every illusion and left only what was real. "You're on time," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I was half expecting you at noon." "Contrary to popular belief," he replied dryly, "I don't spend my mornings lounging on piles of gold." Hermione almost smiled. Almost. "Well then, let's get started." They spent the first hour sorting through reports from St. Mungo's. 2 victims, both young wizards, had collapsed after handling an antique necklace bearing a serpent-shaped clasp. Curses had been layered so intricately that even the healers couldn't identify all of them. The magic pulsed darkly from the artifact, echoing traces of spells used during the war. "It's old," Hermione murmured, studying the photographs. "Possibly pre-Second Wizarding War, maybe even dating back to Grindelwald's era." Draco leaned over her shoulder to see the parchment, his breath brushing her hair. "The style's more recent. Look at the sigils here. They're adapted from runespore enchantments. Someone wanted this thing to look ancient, but it isn't. It's a forgery." Hermione turned, surprised. "You can tell that." He gave a faint shrug. "My mother collected cursed jewelry. Old habits die hard." Their eyes met for a moment, long enough for Hermione to see something flicker in his expression, the faintest trace of shame. She looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the page. Then, whoever forged this knew exactly what they were doing, and they're selling them through Nocturne Alley. "Which means," Draco said quietly, "they're not done yet." By midday, they were back in the field. Nocturne Alley looked almost the same as it had before the war. Crooked, narrow, always damp, as though the street itself recoiled from sunlight. Shops had reopened, some selling harmless oddities, others still shrouded in secrecy. The air hummed faintly with the residue of dark spells long past. They began at the silver thread. The shopkeeper had vanished. "Left in a hurry," Draco muttered, crouching near the counter. He brushed a hand over the dust. Someone obliviated her before she could talk again. "Look here, spell residue, neatly done." Hermione frowned. Someone wants to cover their tracks. They moved deeper into the alley, following the faint magical trail that shimmered like frost beneath their detection charms. The trail wound behind the old Borgin and Burke's building, now shuttered and sealed under ministry law, and into the ruins of a smaller structure that must once have been a storage vault. The door was half collapsed, the wood rotted away. Inside, it smelled of damp earth and metal. Shelves lined the walls, some still bearing scraps of parchment or broken glass vials. A faint glow pulsed from beneath the floorboards. Hermione drew her wand. Lumos. The light revealed a hidden trapdoor etched with runes. Ancient, precise, and dangerous. Draco knelt beside her, tracing the carvings with careful fingers. "These are old family symbols. Black family work by the look of it. I'd bet galleons this place was once a hidden repository for banned items." "And someone's been using it again," Hermione whispered. "Recently." Draco reached for the latch. "Stand back." The trapdoor opened with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. They exchanged a glance. "I'll go first," Draco said. "Don't be ridiculous," Hermione protested, already stepping forward. "Granger!" She ignored him and led the way down. The air grew colder with every step. When they reached the bottom, the tunnel opened into a small chamber lined with stone shelves. On them lay various objects: a wand snapped in half, a mirror cracked into spiderwebs, a locket that hummed faintly when touched by the light, and at the center of the room, a circle of ash. Hermione's breath caught. The ash formed a perfect ring, embedded with fragments of silver. Inside the ring lay a parchment, blackened around the edges. Draco stepped closer, his face pale. "This is ritual work." Hermione nodded. "Someone's trying to reforge power from destroyed dark objects. That's impossible. They were cursed to prevent regeneration." "Impossible," Draco murmured, "is exactly what Death Eaters used to aim for." As they examined the ring, a faint whisper filled the air, like a sigh from the stones themselves. Hermione froze. The ash stirred. Then, suddenly, silver light flashed, and a shape rose before them. A phantom figure, faceless, shifting. Hermione raised her wand. "Protego!" The shield shimmered, catching the spectral blast that shot toward them. The air crackled with magic. Draco shouted a counter-curse, his voice sharp and sure, and the light dispersed into smoke. When silence returned, Hermione's heart pounded. "That wasn't a guarding charm," she said softly. "That was a memory echo. Someone died here." Draco's expression darkened. "Recently?" They backed away, each lost in thought. The chamber seemed to breathe around them, the walls heavy with secrets. When they climbed back to the street, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained bruised and heavy. Hermione turned to him. "We'll need to report this to Kingsley. The ritual, the ash, all of it." Draco didn't answer immediately. He was staring down the alley, his eyes distant. "You realize what this means," he said finally. "Whoever's behind this isn't just selling artifacts. They're experimenting with the kind of magic that nearly tore our world apart." Hermione shivered. "Then we stop them." He looked at her then, properly looked, as though seeing her not as the Gryffindor know-it-all from school, but as the witch standing beside him in the wreckage, unafraid. "You really think we can?" he asked softly. She held his gaze. "I know we have to." For a moment, the world felt suspended between them, the echoes of what had been and the faint, fragile hope of what could be. Then Hermione gathered her notes, tucking the blackened parchment carefully into a protective case. They walked back toward the ministry, side by side, the fog curling around them like the breath of the past. Hermione's mind raced with questions about the ritual, the silver ash, and the unknown hand behind it all. But one question lingered longer than the rest. Why had Draco Malfoy looked at the circle of ash with such familiarity, as though he had seen it before? And why, despite herself, did Hermione's heart twist not with fear, but with something far more complicated, something she wasn't ready to name? The following days blurred together, a rhythm of parchment, investigation, and uneasy silence. Hermione buried herself in the work, sifting through every recorded case of dark magic linked to relics or cursed jewelry. Yet even as she read, her thoughts kept straying back to that underground chamber, the circle of ash and silver, the whispering echo, the unmistakable pulse of dark enchantment. It haunted her dreams, twisting through the edges of her mind like smoke that refused to disperse. Across the ministry's wide atrium, Draco Malfoy walked with his usual calm precision, though his eyes betrayed a deeper unease. Since the night in Nocturne Alley, he had spoken little of what they'd found, but Hermione had noticed how his gaze lingered on the file whenever they met, as if he recognized something he dared not say aloud. They met again that afternoon in her office. The window behind Hermione was streaked with rain, and the grey light made the parchment on her desk seem older, yellower, as if time itself had seeped into the ink. Draco leaned against the opposite chair, his arms folded, watching her. "You've read the reports from magical forensics?" he asked. "I have," she replied, not looking up. "The residue from the ritual circle contains traces of powdered moonstone, phoenix ash, and silver dust. That combination doesn't belong to any known cursecraft." He tilted his head. "Silver dust, you say?" "Yes. Refined silver, charmed for conductivity. Whoever performed that spell knew advanced alchemical theory. And they were careful. No identifiable signature." Draco's brow furrowed. "Silver dust is rare. It's used in purification magic or in binding spells." Hermione finally met his eyes. "Exactly. Someone tried to bind something that should have stayed destroyed." Their gazes held for a heartbeat, and Hermione felt the unspoken weight of what that meant. After a long pause, Draco reached into his cloak and unfolded a small velvet pouch. "I went back to the ruins near Borgin and Burke's," he said quietly. "Found this beneath one of the shelves." He poured the contents onto her desk, a single fragment of blackened metal, shaped like the tip of a serpent's fang. Even before her wand touched it, Hermione could feel the hum of magic emanating from it. She whispered a revealing charm, and faint silver runes shimmered across the surface. "These markings," she hesitated. "They're from the same series as the amulet. This could be part of the set." "Or part of something larger," Draco murmured. He stepped closer to inspect it, and she caught a faint whiff of cologne and rain-damp wool. For a moment, the world narrowed to the two of them, bent over the relic, their wands casting pale light across the dark metal. Then, suddenly, the fragment flared. A pulse of energy burst outward, strong enough to send the parchment flying. Hermione stumbled back, but Draco reacted faster. His hand caught her wrist, steadying her as the light died down. When it was gone, the fragment lay motionless again, but its surface now glowed faintly with etched letters. Hermione's breath came shallow. "It reacted to us." Draco released her hand slowly, his face unreadable. "Or to one of us," he said softly. She drew a slow breath, regaining her composure. "The runes, they've changed. It's a name, or part of one." She bent closer, squinting. Selwyn." Draco's expression darkened. "Selwyn. The family was old blood, half of them imprisoned after the war, the rest vanished. My father mentioned once that they dealt in relic retrieval." "Retrieval," Hermione repeated, "as in reclaiming cursed artifacts." He hesitated. "Or resurrecting them." A chill crept through her. So someone from that family might be continuing the work, or finishing what was started during the war. Draco said nothing, his gaze fixed on the glowing metal. Hermione saw the conflict flicker across his face. Recognition, dread, and something that almost looked like guilt. That evening they travelled by Portkey to the Selwyn estate, a ruined manor on the edge of Wiltshire. The building had been abandoned after the war, its once grand walls overrun by ivy and silence. Mist rolled low across the grounds, curling around broken statues and shattered gates. "This place gives me the creeps," Hermione muttered, pulling her cloak tighter. "Welcome to my childhood social circle," Draco replied dryly, but his tone lacked amusement. They stepped through the warped front door, wands raised. The air inside was stale and cold, carrying the scent of old parchment and mildew. Portraits still hung on the cracked walls, their painted eyes watching silently as the intruders passed. Hermione stopped near a marble staircase, pointing. "Look, footprints, fresh." They followed the trail through a corridor into what had once been a drawing room. The fireplace was cold, the furniture covered in dust, except for the table at the center, where someone had cleared a space. Spread across it were scraps of parchment covered in runes, diagrams, and fragments of silver thread. Hermione scanned the notes. "Alchemy, again. Whoever was here is experimenting with soul fragments, or trying to extract magical residue from cursed items." Draco's face was pale. "That's not alchemy. That's desecration." A sudden sound made them both spin, a creak from the hallway behind. Hermione's wand snapped up. "Who's there?" No answer. Then, from the shadows, a hooded figure darted out. A flash of red light filled the room. Hermione deflected the curse, countering with a silent spell that sent the figure sprawling. Draco moved swiftly, disarming them with practiced precision. The intruder hit the floor hard, his hood falling back, revealing a young man, scarcely older than 20, his eyes wide and frightened. "Please," he gasped, "don't hurt me. I'm not with them anymore." Hermione knelt, wand still trained on him. "Who are you?" "Edric Selwyn," he stammered. "I'm what's left of the family." Draco's expression tightened. "And what exactly are you doing reviving your family's dark business?" "I wasn't," the young man pleaded. "I swear it. I came here to destroy the last of the artifacts. But someone got here first. A woman. She took the rest. She said she needed them to finish the binding." Hermione's pulse quickened. "A woman? Who?" He shook his head. "She wore a mask, silver, but she called herself the Heir of Ash." The words hung in the air like a curse. Hermione exchanged a look with Draco, both recognizing that strange title from the parchment in the ritual chamber. "The Heir of Ash," Hermione murmured. "It's not just a name. It's part of the ritual. Whoever she is, she believes she can resurrect what Voldemort left behind." Selwyn nodded frantically. "She said the war wasn't over, that the true power sleeps beneath the ashes. Please, you have to stop her." Draco stepped closer, his voice cold and steady. "Where did she go?" "I don't know," Selwyn whispered. "She vanished, through the old family flue. The destination rune was wiped clean." Hermione sighed. "We'll take him to the ministry. He'll be safer there." Draco gave a curt nod, but his mind seemed elsewhere. As they escorted Selwyn out of the ruined house, the fog thickened, swallowing the outlines of the old manor until it disappeared behind them like a ghost. When they returned to the ministry, Hermione could feel the exhaustion settle into her bones. Yet beneath the fatigue burned something sharper: anticipation, fear, and an unspoken awareness of the man beside her. Draco Malfoy walked in silence, his pale face unreadable. But once, as they passed the empty corridor leading to the archives, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "The Heir of Ash," he said. "You know, Granger, that title was once whispered among the old families, a myth about the one who would rise from the ashes of the Dark Lord's fall. Most of us never believed it." Hermione turned to him, her voice low. "And now?" He met her gaze. Now, I'm not sure what I believe. Their footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into the quiet hum of the ministry. Two figures walking toward the unknown, bound by duty, shadowed by the past, and drawn ever closer by the fire neither could name. The days that followed were heavy with unease. Hermione threw herself into research, combing through old records in the Department of Mysteries, hunting any reference to the name Heir of Ash. She found fragments, half-legends, mentions of obscure covens that had once worshipped destruction as rebirth, and a chilling notion that some believed the Dark Lord's power had not vanished, but scattered, waiting for the right vessel to call it home again. Draco, meanwhile, had grown quieter. The more they uncovered, the more she sensed something stirring behind his calm facade. Guilt, perhaps, or memory. He still carried the cool composure of the Malfoy heir, but sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, Hermione caught glimpses of a man haunted by what he'd seen and done. On a foggy Thursday morning, Kingsley summoned them both to his office. The minister's usually calm features were drawn tight with worry. "We've intercepted communications," he began without preamble. "Several former sympathizers of Voldemort have gone missing. Their last known movements place them in the western counties, near the ruins of Malfoy Manor." Hermione's stomach twisted. "You think they're connected to the Heir of Ash?" Kingsley nodded grimly. "Possibly. The name appeared in one of the encrypted messages. We can't be sure what it means yet, but you two are the only ones with the right experience to find out." Hermione hesitated. "You're sending us to Malfoy Manor?" Draco said nothing for a long moment. His eyes flickered toward the minister, then to Hermione. "If someone's using my family's land for dark rituals," he said quietly, "then it's time I faced what's left of it." They departed that afternoon. The sky was heavy with rain, clouds rolling low over Wiltshire like bruises across the horizon. The countryside looked the same as it had the day Hermione last saw it, the night she'd been dragged, terrified and broken, through the doors of Malfoy Manor. But now she stood beside its heir, wand steady, heart no longer ruled by fear. The once grand gates lay rusted and half collapsed. The path leading to the manor was overgrown with weeds. Crows circled above the blackened ruins, their cries echoing through the mist. The war had reduced the estate to bones and ash, its great halls now nothing but echoing shells. Draco paused before the entrance. His face was unreadable, but his hand trembled slightly on his wand. Hermione said nothing. She knew better than to offer pity. They stepped inside. The entrance hall was a cavern of shadows, its marble floors cracked, its chandelier a twisted ruin. The portrait frames were empty. Their inhabitants had fled long ago. Yet beneath the dust, the air thrummed faintly with lingering magic, ancient, proud, and scarred. Hermione cast a detection charm, and faint lines of light rippled across the floor like veins of silver. "Residual spellwork," she murmured. "Recent." Draco moved closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "It shouldn't be possible. The wards here died with my mother. Then someone has reawakened them." They followed the trail through the west corridor, once the family gallery, until it ended at a set of double doors. The left was half torn from its hinges, revealing a room that made Hermione's stomach drop. The old drawing room. It was here she had been imprisoned years ago, where Bellatrix Lestrange's laughter had echoed like madness, and where the dark mark had burned above them. Even now, the air carried the faint, acrid scent of old curses. Draco's eyes darkened. "I didn't know you'd been in this room. I try not to think about it," she said softly. He looked at her then, not with pity, but remorse, raw and quiet. "If I could change what happened here, I would." Hermione held his gaze for a moment, seeing the truth in his expression. "We can't change it," she said. "We can only make sure nothing like it happens again." A sudden sound broke the silence, a rustle of movement from behind the curtains. Hermione spun, wand raised. "Expelliarmus!" The drapes flew open. A figure stumbled forward, thin and wild-eyed. A man in tattered robes, his hair white with ash. He looked half-starved, half-mad, clutching something close to his chest. "Stay back," he rasped. "It's not done yet. She'll finish it. She'll bring him back." Hermione advanced slowly. Who were you talking about?" "The heir," he screamed. "She promised we'd see the dawn of his return, silver flame and ash reborn." Draco disarmed him with a single flick, the wand flying from the man's grasp. Hermione grabbed his wrist, pulling the object from his arms. It was a small silver disc, engraved with runes identical to those they had seen before. But this one pulsed faintly, as if alive. "What is this?" she demanded. The man's eyes rolled back, his voice turning to a whisper. "The key. The vessel must be bound before the next moon. Then the ashes will breathe again." And with that, his body convulsed. He gasped once, twice, and then went limp. Hermione knelt, checking for a pulse. Nothing. "He's dead," she whispered. "No spell hit him," Draco said grimly. "Something killed him from inside. A binding curse, maybe. She didn't want him talking." Hermione clutched the disc, staring at the faintly glowing surface. "The heir of Ash is preparing something big. Whatever this ritual is, it's tied to him, to Voldemort, and we just found one of the keys." Draco turned toward the window. The wind howled through the broken glass, scattering ash across the floor. "Then we have to stop her before she finishes the others." They returned to the ministry long after nightfall, soaked and silent. The storm followed them, drumming against the windows as Hermione laid the disc on her desk. The light within it still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "Every clue points back to these relics," she said. "There's a pattern. The amulet, the serpent fragment, this disc. They're all pieces of something bigger, a conduit." Draco nodded slowly. 3 pieces, perhaps 4, like the corners of an ancient seal. Once completed, it could channel immense power, or awaken it. Hermione met his gaze. "You've seen something like this before, haven't you?" He hesitated, then looked away. "When I was a boy, my father spoke of the legacy of Ash, a myth among the old families, a network of artifacts that could absorb and transfer dark magic, designed centuries ago as a weapon of inheritance. Most thought it was destroyed." "Apparently not," Hermione said grimly. Draco leaned forward, his tone low. "If the heir of Ash believes she can use it to resurrect the Dark Lord's essence, she'll need one final catalyst: blood." Hermione's stomach turned cold. "Whose?" He looked at her then, his eyes silver and haunted. "Someone who touched both sides of the war. Someone pure of intent, but tainted by darkness. Someone like you." The words hung between them like thunder. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Hermione stood abruptly, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Then she won't have me, and she won't have this." She locked the silver disc into a containment ward, sealing it with a flick of her wand. Draco watched her, admiration flickering behind his weariness. "You really think you can outwit a legacy built by centuries of blood?" Hermione turned to him, her eyes fierce. "I've done worse." For the first time, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. Not mocking, but real, quiet, and strangely warm. "I don't doubt that, Granger." Outside, lightning split the night. The silver light flickered across their faces, hers bright with determination, his shadowed by memory. In that fleeting moment, they were no longer Gryffindor and Slytherin, war hero and fallen heir. They were two survivors, standing against the darkness that refused to die. And somewhere, beyond the walls of the Ministry, a woman in a silver mask whispered ancient words over a fourth relic, her voice rising through the storm, carrying a promise that the ashes of the past would burn again. Rain fell over London like a curtain of glass, streaking against the windows of the Ministry. The storm had not lifted since the night at Malfoy Manor. The building hummed with quiet urgency. Reports of missing wizards, strange magical surges, whispers of a rising force no one could name aloud. In the heart of it all, Hermione Granger sat at her desk, staring at the silver disc locked within its containment ward. Its faint glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the ritual circle, ash swirling like smoke, the silver runes gleaming, and a faceless woman standing in the dark, her voice echoing. "When the ashes breathe again, the old world will rise." Draco entered without knocking, his boots leaving wet prints across the marble. He looked worn, his eyes shadowed. "You haven't gone home, have you?" Hermione didn't answer. "I've been studying the inscriptions," she said instead, her voice soft but steady. "They're not just protective runes, they're coordinates." He frowned. "Coordinates to what?" "To the other relics," she said, turning the parchment toward him. "Whoever created these artifacts linked them. Each one acts as both a container and a beacon. When aligned, they form a network, like a web of power." Draco leaned over her shoulder, studying the runes. His breath brushed her ear, sending an involuntary shiver through her. "You think the heir of Ash is collecting them to complete the network?" "She isn't just collecting them," Hermione said. "She's feeding them. Every ritual, every death, every disappearance, she's using them to recharge the artifacts." His eyes narrowed. "And when all four are ready?" Hermione hesitated. "Then the seal opens, and whatever lies within it returns." A heavy silence settled between them. The air seemed to pulse faintly, as if the relic on the table could hear them. Draco straightened. "Then we find the remaining pieces before she does." Hermione nodded, gathering the things. "There's a pattern to her movements. Each site is connected to families with Death Eater ties. The next logical location would be somewhere tied to the Carrows or the Lestranges." Draco's expression darkened. "Then I know where she'll go next." He didn't elaborate, only said, "Come on," before leading her out into the rain. They apparated to a desolate cliffside overlooking the North Sea. The wind howled, whipping their cloaks around them. Below, the waves crashed against jagged rocks. A narrow path wound down to a hidden cave entrance, half concealed by mist and sea spray. The Lestrange vault, Draco said, his voice raised against the wind. Not the one at Gringotts. This is older, built before the war. My father once mentioned it, though he claimed it had been sealed forever. Hermione cast a detection charm. Faint runes shimmered along the rock face, layered wards of concealment, centuries old. They're still active, she said, but weakening. Someone's been tampering with them. Then we're in the right place, Draco murmured. They slipped inside, their footsteps echoing softly against damp stone. The tunnel sloped downward into darkness. The air grew colder, heavy with salt, and the faint metallic tang of old magic. Torch sconces lined the walls, unlit for decades, until, with a flick of Hermione's wand, they burst into pale blue flame. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber. Stone pillars rose from the floor like the ribs of a sleeping beast. At the far end stood an altar carved from obsidian, its surface inlaid with veins of silver. And upon that altar lay the third relic. It was a dagger, slender and gleaming, the hilt shaped like a serpent coiled around a flame. The blade pulsed faintly, alive with energy that hummed through the air like a heartbeat. Hermione approached slowly. "It's beautiful," she whispered, though her tone carried unease. Draco's gaze lingered on it, his expression unreadable. It belonged to Bellatrix. She called it Vita Sinis, the life of ash. She used it to seal curses, not to kill. Hermione reached toward it, but before her fingers touched the hilt, a flash of silver erupted across the room. "Protego!" Draco shouted, thrusting his wand forward. The shield absorbed the blast that came from the shadows, a streak of red light that would have struck her square in the chest. Hermione spun. A figure emerged from behind a pillar, tall, cloaked, and masked in silver, the heir of ash. Her voice echoed through the chamber, smooth as silk and cold as glass. "You're too late, both of you. The circle is almost complete." Hermione raised her wand. "You're feeding on things that were meant to be destroyed. Whatever you're trying to resurrect, it will destroy you too." The woman laughed, a sound that sent chills crawling up Hermione's spine. "Destroy me? No, Granger. It will liberate me." At the sound of her name, Hermione froze. Draco stepped forward, fury flashing across his face. "Who are you?" The mask tilted toward him. "You don't recognize your own blood?" She pulled the mask away. Beneath it was a pale, sharp face, her eyes a mirror of Draco's own. "Astoria," he breathed, voice breaking. Hermione felt the world tilt. Your wife?" "Not anymore," Astoria Malfoy said softly. "Not since I saw what this world truly is. You think you destroyed darkness, but you only buried it under guilt and hypocrisy. I will raise it again, pure, eternal." "Stop this," Draco said, stepping closer. "You're ill, Astoria. This isn't you." "Oh, but it is," she hissed, eyes glowing faintly with silver light. "This is what the Malfoys were meant to be, restorers of magic the world has forsaken. He spoke to me, Draco, in the ashes of our house. He showed me the truth." Hermione's heart pounded. "You heard Voldemort's voice?" Astoria smiled faintly. "Not his voice, his essence. It lingers, in the relics, in the cursed bloodlines. Soon, when the final vessel is found, he will rise again, not as flesh, but as will." She raised her wand, and the dagger lifted from the altar, floating between them. The silver light within it pulsed brighter. Draco stepped forward, his wand steady. "You're not bringing him back. I won't let you." "Then you'll die trying," she said coldly. The chamber erupted into chaos. Spells crackled, striking stone and sending fragments flying. Hermione's shield deflected one curse, but another hit close enough to scorch the hem of her cloak. She countered with a stunner that Astoria narrowly dodged. Draco shouted an incantation Hermione didn't recognize. Old, elegant magic. And the dagger dropped to the floor with a clatter. For a moment, it seemed the light inside it faltered, but Astoria only smiled. You can't stop what's already begun. She vanished in a burst of silver flame, leaving behind only echoes and the faint scent of smoke. Silence fell, broken only by the crash of the sea outside. Hermione lowered her wand slowly, her breath ragged. She's part of this. She's been part of it all along. Draco's face was pale, drawn tight with disbelief and pain. I thought she was dead. After the war, she grew sick. Her family said it was a curse, something hereditary. But she was hiding this. Hermione placed a hand on his arm, gentle, steady. We'll find her, and we'll stop her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he looked down at her hand, and his voice softened. You shouldn't have to fight my ghosts, Granger. Hermione met his gaze. Then let's face them together. They stood in silence, the sea roaring in the distance, the dagger between them glinting faintly in the torchlight. Its light pulsed slower now, but not gone, as if waiting, patient and eternal. And as they turned to leave the chamber, neither of them noticed the faint shimmer of silver runes flaring to life along the walls. Ancient magic awakening, whispering promises of return, of rebirth, of ashes that still burned. Dawn broke pale and cold over London, the rain finally thinning to a mist that clung to the cobblestones like ghostly breath. The ministry's clock chimed 6 as Hermione entered her office, fatigue dulling her movements. The relics lay sealed in protective wards along the far wall. The amulet, the serpent fragment, and the dagger they had recovered from the Lestrange vault. Each gleamed faintly, pulsing with a shared rhythm, as though aware of one another. Hermione had never trusted coincidence, and she trusted magic even less when it began to act as though it had a will of its own. She sank into her chair, rubbing her temples, the memory of Astoria Malfoy's eyes still vivid in her mind. Pale, bright, and utterly certain. A woman consumed by belief was more dangerous than any dark spell. And yet, it wasn't the power that haunted Hermione most. It was Draco's expression as he watched his wife vanish in that burst of silver flame. The door creaked open. He stepped in without a word, his hair disheveled, the collar of his robes askew, an image of control fractured. She's clever, he said hoarsely. Astoria always was. If she's gone to ground, it means she's found protection. Someone's helping her. Hermione looked up. You're thinking of the Selwyns? He nodded. And possibly the remnants of the Rosier line. There were families who survived the war untouched. They learned to hide in plain sight, not openly loyal to the Dark Lord, but quietly nursing the same ideals. Hermione stood, walking toward the warded cabinet. The light from the relics cast her reflection in 3 ghostly fragments across the glass. We'll need to move these. If Astoria tracks them here, she'll come for them. Draco approached, studying the glow. And when she does? Hermione turned. Then we'll be ready. Their plan unfolded over the following days, one born not of desperation, but grim necessity. Each artifact was to be relocated to a different secure site under the Ministry's authority, their wards interlinked but separate. The process required long hours of enchantment and calibration, runes layered upon runes. Draco assisted her, his precision lending a quiet efficiency to their work. Despite herself, Hermione began to notice the rhythm between them, the silent coordination, the instinctive understanding. He anticipated her spells. She counterbalanced his wards. Magic flowed smoother when they worked side by side, as though the old-school rivalry had burned away, leaving something quieter and stronger in its place. One evening, as they worked by wandlight in one of the lower chambers, Draco paused mid-incantation, his wand hovering above the silver dagger. "Do you ever think," he said quietly, "that no matter what we do, some things are destined to repeat themselves?" Hermione glanced up. "History," he nodded. "Cycles, darkness returning, the same mistakes, different names." His voice was low, almost to himself. "My father used to say that blood remembers, even when minds choose to forget. I never wanted to believe him. But now—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Hermione lowered her wand. "Blood doesn't decide who we are, Malfoy. Choices do." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "You sound like Dumbledore." Then he was right. The light flickered between them, soft and unsteady. Hermione could see exhaustion etched in his face, and beneath it, something raw. She almost reached out, but stopped herself. Moments later, a tremor shivered through the air. The wards pulsed, then dimmed. Draco stiffened. "Did you feel that?" Hermione turned sharply. The relics vibrated faintly, their glow faltering. Then, one by one, they began to hum, a low, resonant sound that made the walls tremble. "Something's interfering with the network," she said, moving toward the wards. "It's resonating from outside the ministry." Draco's face went white. "She's found the fourth piece." The realization hit like cold water. Hermione barely paused to grab her cloak before they were running down the corridors, their footsteps echoing through the sleeping ministry. They apparated to the coordinates Hermione's detection spell revealed, a forgotten chapel on the outskirts of Gloucestershire, half swallowed by ivy and fog. The moment they arrived, Hermione felt it. Magic, thick in the air, ancient and electric. The chapel's stained glass windows had shattered long ago, replaced by creeping vines. At the center of the ruined nave stood Astoria, her silver mask discarded beside her feet. She was thinner now, almost translucent, her skin glowing faintly with silver light. The air around her shimmered, heavy with the same pulse that emanated from the relics. In her hands, she held the final piece, a chalice carved from obsidian and silver, swirling with liquid light. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said softly. Hermione raised her wand. "You're binding power that doesn't belong to anyone. You'll tear the world apart." Astoria tilted her head, her expression eerily serene. "No, Granger, I'm mending it. The world you built after the war is a lie, a fragile piece sewn over rot. The ministry buries truth beneath paperwork, while wizards with pure hearts live in fear of their own legacy. I will restore what was lost." "By bringing him back?" Draco's voice cracked through the air, sharper than any spell. Astoria turned toward him, and for an instant her eyes softened. "I did this for us, Draco. For what we could have been, untainted, eternal." He took a step closer, wand trembling. "You don't understand what you're invoking. He wasn't a god. He was destruction. You'll only ever serve his shadow." Astoria smiled sadly. You still think in opposites, light and dark, good and evil. But what if they're the same? What if destruction is creation? Hermione's pulse thundered. The relics in her satchel glowed brighter, responding to the chalice. The air crackled. Draco's voice broke. "Astoria, please!" She lifted the chalice high. Silver light exploded outward, striking the relics in Hermione's hands. The hum became a roar. For a moment, the world dissolved in blinding light. When it cleared, the relics floated in the air, suspended between Astoria and Hermione. Streams of energy arced between them, brilliant and violent. Hermione felt the magic tearing through her, raw and ancient. She struggled to hold it back, forcing her wand against the surge. "Draco!" she shouted. "Break the link, now!" He didn't hesitate. Raising his wand, he cried an incantation in Latin, the words slicing through the thunder of magic. A burst of white light erupted, striking the chalice. The silver glow fractured, shattering into 1,000 shards that rained down like starlight. Astoria screamed. The relics dropped to the ground, dark and lifeless once more. When the light faded, she lay motionless on the stone floor, her pale hair spread like a halo. Draco knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he turned her over. Her eyes fluttered open, the silver fading from them. "Draco." Her voice was no more than a whisper. "I only wanted to make you proud." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "You already did." A faint smile touched her lips before her eyes closed, and the last shimmer of silver bled from her skin. Hermione stood in silence, her chest tight. The chapel was still now, save for the distant roll of thunder. She wanted to speak, to comfort him, but the words caught in her throat. Draco remained kneeling, his wand forgotten beside him, until the sound of approaching footsteps made him rise. Hermione reached for his arm, steadying him. "We'll take her back," she said gently. "She deserves peace." He nodded once, eyes hollow. Together they gathered the relics, sealing them with new wards. Their light had gone out, but Hermione knew better than to think their story was over. Some powers never truly died. They simply slept. Outside, the storm began to break. Dawn light crept across the horizon, cold and pale, washing the sky in muted gold. As they stood in the doorway, Hermione glanced at him. His expression was unreadable. Grief and guilt and weary resolve woven together. She believed the ashes could bring new life, he said quietly. But maybe some things are meant to stay buried. Hermione looked out over the fields, where the first birds were stirring. Or maybe, she murmured, they can still be remade into something better. For the first time, he turned toward her, his voice softer. "You really believe that, don't you?" She met his eyes. "I have to." Their gazes held, two survivors beneath a sky still healing from stormlight. And though the wind carried the scent of rain and ash, Hermione thought she saw something glimmer in the ruins behind them. A faint silver light, pulsing once, like the echo of a heartbeat not yet gone. The days after the confrontation at the chapel passed in a haze of silence and ash. The official report filed at the ministry said little, only that a dark ritual had been stopped and the threat neutralized. But Hermione knew how fragile that statement was. She had seen what the relics could do, how alive they had felt in her hands, and she could not convince herself that they were truly inert. The relics now rested in the Department of Mysteries, sealed within containment chambers lined with runes so ancient that even she could not decipher them all. Only 3 people were authorized to enter that vault: Kingsley, Hermione, and Draco. The others at the ministry whispered of the power they had witnessed, but no one spoke the name Heir of Ash. Hermione visited the vault every morning. She told herself it was to ensure the wards held, to check for signs of reactivation. But as the weeks passed, she realized the truth. She came because she could not stop thinking about them, about the pulse that had thrummed through her veins when the relics had awakened, about how close she had come to being consumed by it. Draco rarely appeared at the ministry now. The Malfoy name, already a ghost of what it had once been, drew whispers again after the discovery of Astoria's involvement. Reporters had camped outside the gates of the manor ruins for days, desperate for photographs of the disgraced son. He ignored them all. When he finally returned, 2 weeks later, Hermione found him in her office at dawn, standing by the window with the early light spilling across his face. He looked different, thinner, his hair unkempt, but there was a steadiness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. "You're here early," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep." His voice was rough, like gravel. "I had to see the relics again." She hesitated, then nodded. Together they descended to the lower floors of the ministry. The lift hummed softly, the only sound between them. When the doors opened, the chill of the vault swept over them. Hermione unlocked the final ward, her wand movements precise. The heavy doors groaned open to reveal the circular chamber beyond. In the center stood 4 pedestals, each bearing one of the relics: the amulet, the serpent fragment, the dagger, and the chalice. Their light was gone, their surfaces dull and lifeless. "They look harmless," Draco said, stepping closer. "They always do," Hermione murmured. He turned toward her, expression unreadable. "I can't stop thinking about her, about what she believed. She wasn't wrong that our world is broken, Granger. Even now, there are those who think in bloodlines and purity. The hatred didn't vanish, it just hid its face." Hermione folded her arms. "You think resurrecting an ideology through dark magic would have fixed it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but maybe she thought she could rebuild it, burn away what was rotten." He gave a bitter laugh. "Fire destroys, but it also forges. She didn't understand the difference." Hermione studied him, her voice softening. "And what about you? Do you?" He met her gaze. "I'm learning." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and fragile. The glow from the torches flickered, throwing shifting shadows across his face. Hermione broke the quiet first. "The ministry will want to destroy these eventually. They're too dangerous to keep." Draco's eyes lingered on the chalice. "Destroying them won't erase what they represent." "No," she agreed, "but it might stop others from using them again." As she spoke, the faintest tremor rippled through the air. It was so subtle she thought at first she had imagined it. Then she saw it, the smallest flicker of light from within the chalice, a shimmer like the dying breath of a candle. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Draco was already moving, wand raised. "Step back." The light faded, leaving nothing but darkness once more. Hermione's heart pounded. "It's dormant, but not dead. The connection hasn't broken." "Connection to what?" "I don't know." Kingsley was furious when they reported it. Reinforcements were summoned. the wards reinforced with 3 layers of ancient sigils. But Hermione could not shake the feeling that it was not enough. She knew too much of the world's magic now to believe that darkness stayed buried simply because wizards willed it so. That night, she found herself walking through Diagon Alley long after her shops had closed. The cobblestones glistened from recent rain, and the windows glowed with soft, magical light. For once, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the pulse of the world beyond her work. But even here, peace felt like something borrowed, fragile. She was standing outside Flourish and Blots when she heard a familiar voice. Couldn't sleep either. Draco emerged from the shadows of the narrow street, his cloak drawn tight. The moonlight caught the silver threads woven into its edge. Hermione gave a tired smile. "Do you ever sleep?" "Not well." They fell into step together without needing to say where they were going. Their feet carried them to the edge of the alley, where a narrow side street opened into a quiet square. A single tree grew there, its leaves shimmering faintly under the lamplight. Draco leaned against the low wall, watching her. "You ever think about leaving it all behind? The ministry, the endless rebuilding." Hermione tilted her head. "And do what?" "Start again, somewhere quieter, somewhere no one remembers your name." She gave a soft laugh. "I don't think that's possible for either of us." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But sometimes I wish it were." He hesitated. "You fought for a world you believed in, Granger. You actually made it better. People like me, we just try to make peace with it." "You've done more than you think," she said. His eyes found hers. "Have I?" She wanted to answer, but the words tangled somewhere between her heart and her throat. The wind stirred the leaves above them, carrying the faint scent of rain and something older. Smoke, perhaps, or memory. Draco spoke again, quieter this time. "When Astoria died, I thought it would end the legacy, the curse of my family. But maybe there's no ending, just new stories born from the ashes of the old." Hermione looked at him then, really looked, at the faint lines around his eyes, the weary grace of him, the man rebuilt from ruin. "Maybe that's what rebirth means," she said softly. "Not repeating the past, but changing what rises from it." He smiled faintly, a real smile this time, small, uncertain, but genuine. "You always have to find hope in everything, don't you?" "Someone has to." They stood there for a while, the silence between them not heavy, but gentle, like the moment before dawn. For the first time since the war, Hermione felt something stir in her chest that wasn't duty or fear. It was quieter, fragile, but alive. When they finally parted, the streets were empty. Hermione watched him go until he disappeared into the mist. She turned toward home, her steps light though her mind raced with thoughts of what still lingered beneath the surface of their world. And far beneath the ministry, in the sealed vault no one dared approach, the 4 relics pulsed once more, softly, almost imperceptibly. A shimmer of silver light passed through the darkness, and from somewhere deep within the chalice, a whisper echoed, faint but clear. It was not the voice of Voldemort. It was older, patient, waiting, and it spoke a single word, one that made the wards tremble and the air grow cold. "Return." The chill of early winter crept into London, draping the city in fog and shadow. The days shortened, and the Ministry of Magic hummed with weary urgency. Whispers of unease fluttered through its halls. Small incidents, strange flickers of light in remote towns, spells misfiring with no cause. Hermione heard the rumors, of course. She collected them as she did everything, carefully, methodically, until they began to form a pattern that made her blood run cold. It began, as such things often did, with something small. A runaway charm in Devon that summoned ash instead of sparks. A Muggle farmhouse whose walls wept silver liquid. A night in Diagon Alley when the lamps flickered and every reflection in a window turned its face away. Hermione catalogued it all, hoping she was wrong. But deep down she knew what it meant. The relics were waking again. She had taken to visiting the vault every night now, her steps echoing in the lonely corridors beneath the ministry. The torches guttered when she passed, as if sensing the magic that clung to her after so many hours near the cursed artifacts. The relics sat in their wards, unmoving, and yet, when she drew near, she swore she could feel their faint, rhythmic pulse. On this night, the pulse was stronger. The air in the chamber shimmered faintly, a hum deep enough to rattle the runes etched into the stone. Hermione froze at the threshold, wand drawn. The relics glowed faintly, not with light, but with movement. The serpent fragment trembled. The amulet quivered on its pedestal, and from the chalice came a faint thread of silver mist, curling like smoke toward the ceiling. Hermione whispered a containment charm, but the mist only shuddered, then dispersed on its own. It had not been escaping. It had been listening. She turned sharply at the sound of footsteps. Draco stood in the doorway, pale in the torchlight. "I thought I'd find you here. You shouldn't be down here." Her voice was softer than she intended. He ignored the warning, his gaze fixed on the chalice. "It's awake." Hermione's breath caught. "How do you—" "I feel it." His voice was almost a whisper. "Ever since the night at the chapel, it's like something lodged in my chest, something calling to me." Hermione lowered her wand slightly. "That's not possible. You didn't touch them." "I didn't have to." His eyes flicked to hers, grey and haunted. "Astoria did. And I—" He stopped, jaw tightening. Her magic and mine were bound once. Maybe part of that connection survived. The relics pulsed again, faint but rhythmic. Hermione felt it too, a vibration deep in her bones. She moved closer to the chalice, murmuring countercharms under her breath, each one weaker than the last. "Help me reinforce the wards," she said. "If they break—" A loud crack split the air. The serpent fragment flew off its pedestal, striking the containment barrier with a flash of silver light. Hermione threw up a shield, the force of it sending her stumbling backward. Draco caught her before she hit the floor. The chamber filled with shimmering dust, silver and white, swirling like ash in a storm. For an instant, she thought she saw shapes within it. Faces, hundreds of them, all whispering at once. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the magic subsided. Silence fell. The relics lay still again, their light extinguished. But Hermione's heart raced, and the taste of cold metal lingered on her tongue. Draco helped her to her feet, his hand lingering a moment longer than necessary. "You can't keep doing this," he said softly. "You're driving yourself mad watching these things." "I don't have a choice," she replied. "If they're waking, I have to be here." He studied her face for a long time before sighing. "Then I'm staying too." She wanted to protest, but something in his tone, quiet, resolute, stopped her. They worked in silence through the night, tracing new wards, layering protective sigils into the stone. When they finally stepped back, the chamber hummed faintly with renewed strength. "Temporary," Hermione said, "but it will hold for now." Draco nodded. "And after now?" She didn't answer. When they left the vault, dawn was already seeping through the high windows of the ministry. They walked together through the empty corridors, the world washed pale with early light. It felt almost peaceful, until Hermione noticed the fine dust clinging to Draco's sleeve. Silver dust. "Wait," she said, reaching for his arm. "You're—" The dust shimmered under her touch, then vanished. Draco's expression turned unreadable. "Residual magic, that's all." Hermione didn't believe him, but she let it go. 2 nights later, she found him again, standing alone by the riverbank near Westminster, staring into the dark water. The reflection of the city lights danced on the surface, pale and uncertain. "They're growing stronger," he said without turning. "I feel it more each day, like a heartbeat in the air." Hermione stood beside him. "You should have told me sooner." "I didn't want to make it real." He looked down at his hands, flexing them. "Sometimes I see her, you know, Astoria, in dreams. She stands in the ruins of the manor, the relics burning behind her. She says it's not over." Hermione's chest tightened. "It's a memory, nothing more." "Is it?" His eyes met hers, storm grey and searching. "Tell me honestly, Granger, if the relics were destroyed tomorrow, would you feel it? Would you know?" She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think I would." For a long moment they said nothing. The wind carried the smell of smoke and cold stone, and somewhere in the distance a clock struck midnight. Then Draco spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "If they rise again, promise me you'll stop me." Hermione turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" He met her gaze. "You saw it yourself. The connection isn't gone. If the relics need a conduit, they'll use the blood that already knows them." "That's not going to happen." "It might." "No." Her voice was firm now. "I won't lose you to this, Malfoy. Not after everything." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then warmth, faint but real. "You almost sound like you care." She glared at him, but her heart was unsteady. "Don't flatter yourself." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Too late. That night, long after he had gone, Hermione dreamed. She was standing in a field of ash beneath a sky of silver light. The relics lay scattered around her, glowing faintly. In the distance stood 2 figures, one cloaked in shadow, the other in silver flame. She called out, but no sound came. Then the figures turned, and she saw their faces, Draco and Astoria. They stood side by side, their eyes burning with the same pale light. Astoria raised her hand, and the relics trembled. "It isn't over," she whispered. "You cannot destroy what was never truly dead." Hermione woke with a gasp, her heart racing. The window of her flat rattled, and for a moment she thought it was the wind. But when she rose and looked out, she saw it. Faint streaks of silver smoke twisting through the dawn sky, drifting from the direction of the ministry. The relics were calling again, and this time something was answering. London awoke to a strange dawn. The fog that usually clung to the city's riverbanks shimmered faintly, touched with silver light. To muggles, it was just another winter morning. But to wizards, to those who could feel the heartbeat of magic, something was wrong. The air itself hummed, restless and alive. Hermione Granger had not slept in 2 days. Her office at the ministry was a chaos of parchment, books, and half-drained cups of tea. The silver haze outside crept against the windows, casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. She felt it in her bones. The same energy that had pulsed through the relics now pulsed through the air. The door opened softly. Draco Malfoy stood there, pale and drawn, his cloak damp from the mist. His eyes were darker than usual, like storm clouds edged in silver. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "It's spreading." Hermione set down her quill. "The relics are resonating with something outside the wards. Kingsley's monitoring the disturbance, but it's not contained." Draco leaned against the desk, his voice low. "You think she's back?" Hermione met his eyes. "Not Astoria, not fully. But what she awakened may have left an echo, one that's searching for form." He looked away, jaw tightening. "And if it finds one, then we'll have another war." The words hung between them like a curse. That afternoon, they descended again into the vault beneath the ministry. The corridors were colder now, the torches flickering as though afraid to burn too bright. When they reached the chamber, Hermione felt her heart sink. The wards were weakening. Each relic glowed faintly, and threads of silver light stretched between them, forming patterns across the air. Circles, runes, constellations that shifted like living things. The hum of magic filled the space, rising and falling in a rhythm almost like breath. Hermione whispered, "They're synchronizing." Draco moved closer, his expression grim. "Then the seals are failing." As if hearing him, the light flared, blinding and cold. The air shuddered, and for a moment, Hermione felt herself weightless. Images flickered across her vision. The manor in flames, Astoria's eyes, the field of ash from her dream. When the light dimmed, the chamber was silent again. But the chalice, the cursed heart of it all, had moved. It now sat in the center of the floor, the other relics orbiting it like planets around a star. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, swirling with silver smoke. Draco stepped forward, wand raised. "Don't touch it." "I wasn't planning to," Hermione said, but she could feel it pulling at her magic, a slow, seductive tug. "It's reacting to something, maybe proximity. Or maybe to you," he said softly. "You were the one who broke the ritual." Before she could reply, the surface of the chalice rippled, and a voice echoed through the chamber. "Ash to silver, flesh to flame. The vessel awaits." Hermione froze. The voice was not Astoria's, nor was it Voldemort's. It was older, a whisper made of stone and storm, vibrating through every bone in her body. Then, as quickly as it had come, the voice vanished. Draco caught her by the arm. "We need to destroy it. Now." "I've tried," Hermione said, her voice unsteady. "Fiendfire won't touch it. Neither will any dispelling charm. It absorbs everything." "Then what do we do?" She looked up at him, meeting his haunted eyes. "We find the source of its power, and we cut it off." By evening, the silver mist had spread beyond London. Reports came in from all over England, flashes of light in the sky, spells backfiring, magical creatures fleeing from their habitats. The old wards around Hogwarts had flared once, then gone silent. The castle itself seemed to feel the disturbance, ancient stones trembling like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Hermione stood in the middle of the Department of Mysteries, surrounded by unspeakables running tests she barely understood. Every reading pointed to one place: Wiltshire, Malfoy Manor. Draco had known before she said it aloud. He simply nodded, his expression bleak. "It's calling us home." They apparated to the edge of the estate at nightfall. The ruins loomed through the fog, black and skeletal against the silver-lit sky. Hermione felt the wards tremble as they stepped forward, not repelling them, but welcoming them. The air was thick with ash. Where the great hall had once stood, a wide fissure split the ground, glowing faintly with light from beneath. The earth breathed, soft, rhythmic, alive. Draco stared at the ruins, his face unreadable. "She started this here. It has to end here." They moved cautiously toward the fissure. The relic's magic hummed faintly around them. She could feel the pull, drawing her downward. A wind rose, carrying whispers that might have been words. Hermione whispered, "Do you hear it?" Draco nodded, eyes distant. "It's her, or what's left of her." They reached the edge and looked down. Far below, in the heart of the chasm, silver light swirled like a storm contained in glass. At its center floated a figure, translucent, featureless, but unmistakably human. A voice echoed up from the depths. "The vessel must be filled." Hermione's wand trembled in her hand. "It's trying to anchor itself." To what? To a living soul. Draco turned sharply toward her. "Granger, you can't mean—" Before he could finish, the ground beneath them cracked and the light surged upward. The blast threw them apart. Hermione hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from her lungs. When she looked up, she saw Draco standing at the edge of the fissure, the light wrapping around him like a crown of fire. "Draco!" she screamed. But he stood still, his expression dazed. The light pulsed through him, threads of silver running beneath his skin. His wand clattered to the ground. "It's calling me," he said quietly. "I can hear her." Hermione crawled toward him, reaching out. "Fight it!" He turned to her, and for a heartbeat, she saw the man she knew, not the shadow standing before her. "I can't." The light grew brighter, swallowing the ruins in blinding brilliance. Hermione's mind filled with echoes. Astoria's voice, the whisper of ancient power, the pulse of the relics. And beneath it all, a single word: return. Summoning every ounce of strength, she cast a containment spell around him, her wand blazing with golden light. The silver energy recoiled, twisting, hissing like a wounded thing. The fissure widened, roaring as the ground shook. "Let go!" Draco shouted, his voice breaking. "If you hold it, it'll take you too." "I'm not letting go," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Not again." The magic between them clashed, gold against silver, fire against ash. The world seemed to hang suspended in that moment, all time collapsing into light. Then the fissure exploded. Hermione was thrown backward, tumbling across the stone. The air went silent. When she looked up, the light was gone. The fissure was sealed, nothing left but scorched earth and the faint scent of smoke. "Draco?" she whispered. No answer. Her heart lurched. She scrambled across the debris, searching, calling his name. Then she saw him. He lay unconscious amid the ash, pale but breathing. When she touched his face, his eyes fluttered open. The silver light was gone from them. Only grey remained, soft and weary. "It's over," he murmured. "Isn't it?" Hermione swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "For now." Above them, the mist began to break, the first stars piercing the night. The relics were silent. The world, for the first time in months, was still. But as Hermione helped him to his feet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was only temporary. a pause before something older, deeper, awoke again. And far below, deep beneath the sealed earth of Malfoy Manor, a faint heartbeat continued to pulse, steady, patient, eternal. The winter that followed was long and strange. London seemed quieter, the ministry subdued, as though the whole of magical Britain had exhaled and was waiting for what might come next. Officially, the crisis was over. The relics neutralized, the vault sealed, the silver mist dispersed. But Hermione Granger knew better than to believe in endings. She still dreamed of that night, the fissure at Malfoy Manor, the silver light swallowing the sky, the word return echoing through her mind. She would wake with her heart pounding and the taste of ash on her tongue. Each time she did, she told herself it was only memory. Yet some mornings when she looked into the mirror, she could swear the faintest shimmer of silver flickered in her eyes before it vanished. Draco had not returned to the ministry since that night. After the manor collapsed, he withdrew to a small estate near the southern coast, not the grandeur of his family's past, but a quiet, wind-swept refuge surrounded by salt and pine. Hermione had seen him only once since then, when Kingsley insisted on a debriefing. Draco had answered every question with clipped precision, and then disappeared again, leaving her with a silence that felt heavier than any argument could have. Still, she found herself thinking of him more than she should. It wasn't only the memories they shared, though those were tangled and impossible to escape, but the sense that part of him had stayed behind that night, bound to the magic they had tried to destroy. She was proven right 3 weeks later. It was just past midnight when the owl arrived, a sleek grey bird, its feathers tipped with frost. The note it carried was short, written in Draco's unmistakable hand. Granger, I need your help. Come at once. No address was given. He didn't need to. She knew exactly where to go. The coast was wild that night, wind tearing through the cliffs, waves crashing against black rock. Hermione apparated to a small clearing overlooking the sea, her cloak snapping in the gale. Draco's cottage stood nearby, its windows dark, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. When she knocked, the door opened at once. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days. His skin was pale, his eyes shadowed, and his wand hand trembled slightly as he gestured her inside. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he led her to the table, where a long strip of parchment lay covered in runes and sketches. The ink shimmered silver under the lamplight. "They've returned," he said quietly. "All of them." Hermione stared. "The relics? That's impossible. They're sealed." "We're sealed," he interrupted, voice rough. 3 nights ago, I felt it again. The pulse. It was faint at first, but growing stronger. Then last night." He turned, rolling up his sleeve. Across the pale skin of his forearm, faint lines glowed, intricate, twisting, the same runes that had once covered the relics. Hermione's breath caught. "They're marking you." He gave a hollow laugh. "It seems I've become the vessel after all." She stepped closer, studying the light beneath his skin. The runes were shifting slowly, alive. "Draco, this isn't just residue. It's a binding. The relics are trying to channel through you." "I know," he said. "I can feel them, like whispers in my mind. Sometimes I see things, places I've never been, faces I don't know, and Astoria's voice. It's there too, not as a ghost, as memory." Hermione's hand clenched around her wand. "We'll break the connection. There has to be a way. Maybe. He met her gaze. But if we can't... Don't finish that, she snapped, her voice sharp to hide the fear curling inside her. He smiled faintly, weary and sad. You always were terrible at pretending not to care. Someone has to, she muttered. They worked through the night, candles burning low as parchment filled with calculations and countercharms. Hermione summoned every spell of purification she knew, but nothing severed the bond. The magic inside him was too deeply rooted, part curse, part inheritance. Just before dawn, she tried something desperate, a spell older than Hogwarts itself, one meant to separate bound souls. The room filled with golden light. Draco gasped, dropping to his knees, the runes on his arm flaring white-hot. Hermione shouted the final word of the incantation, and the light exploded outward, rattling the walls. When it faded, she was on the floor, her ears ringing. Draco lay motionless beside her. Draco! She crawled to his side, pressing her hand to his chest. His heartbeat was steady, too steady in fact, like a rhythm not entirely his own. The runes were gone, but a faint silver glow lingered at the base of his throat. His eyes opened slowly. Hermione, he said, but his voice was wrong, deeper, colder. She froze. Say something else. He blinked, confusion flickering in his expression. It's me. Then softer. Granger, it's me. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. But the air around him pulsed with that same rhythm, that same hum she had felt in the vault, the heartbeat of the relics. You're not entirely yourself, she whispered. He looked away. No, but I'm not entirely anyone else either. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Hermione rose slowly, her wand still in her hand, though her arm trembled. We'll fix this, she said. I don't care what it takes. He looked up at her, something almost like peace softening his face. You always think you can save everyone. Not everyone, she said quietly. Just you. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. A real smile, fragile and human. Then let's hope you're right. They left for Hogwarts the next morning. If there was any place that could offer answers, it was there. The oldest stronghold of magic, its very stones steeped in knowledge. The castle loomed above them as they crossed the gates, its towers veiled in mist. Though classes had ended for the term, its halls were far from empty. The portraits whispered as they passed, recognizing two faces, both too young and too old for the weight they carried. Professor McGonagall met them in the great hall. The flickering torches reflected in her spectacles, her expression unreadable. I had hoped never to see either of you under such circumstances again, she said, though her voice softened at the end. But if the reports from the Ministry are true... They're true, Hermione said. The relics are alive, through him. McGonagall's gaze shifted to Draco. For a moment, the sharpness in her eyes faltered, replaced by something almost like pity. Then, we shall do what must be done. That night, they descended into the castle's deepest chambers, rooms even the professors rarely entered. Ancient wards lined the walls, glowing faintly with age. At the center stood a basin carved from obsidian, its surface reflecting not their faces, but their fears. McGonagall motioned for Draco to stand within the circle. This is older magic than either of you can imagine. It may sever what binds you, or destroy you both. Draco looked at Hermione. Still think you can save me? She didn't hesitate. Always. He nodded once. Then let's begin. As McGonagall began the chant, silver light flared from the walls. The runes along the floor came alive, spiraling upward to wrap around Draco's form. Hermione felt the pull again, the relics stirring, reaching through him toward her, the same connection that had bound them since the night they first faced the darkness together. The air filled with a roar like fire, and waves and voices crying from far away. Hermione clung to her wand, her own magic rising to meet his. Their lights mingled, gold and silver, ash and flame, swirling together in a dance that was part destruction, part creation. And as the spell reached its peak, she saw it again, a vision of the field of ash, the relics scattered like stars, and a single figure standing amid them. Not Astoria this time, but Draco, whole and shining, the silver light no longer devouring him, but radiating from him, tempered and human. When the light finally faded, the chamber was still. The basin had cracked, and McGonagall stood pale but steady. Hermione turned and saw Draco kneeling, breathing hard, his skin free of runes, his eyes their natural grey. "It's done," McGonagall whispered. Hermione fell to her knees beside him. "Draco!" He looked up at her, blinking as though waking from a long sleep. "Granger," he murmured. "You did it." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "We did." And for the first time in what felt like years, the air around them was silent. No hum, no pulse, no whisper of ancient power. Just the sound of two heartbeats, steady and alive, echoing in the stillness of the castle. Outside, snow began to fall. The world, at last, was quiet. Snow blanketed the grounds of Hogwarts, softening every sound. The lake had frozen over, its surface catching the pale light of dawn, and from the distant towers came the faint crackle of the fire in the great hall. The storm had passed, yet Hermione still felt its echo beneath her ribs. The memory of silver fire, the trembling power that had nearly swallowed them both. Draco was recovering in the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey fussed as she always had, muttering about exhaustion, magical shock, and uncooperative patients. Hermione stood by the bed, watching him sleep. The sharpness that had defined his features for so long had eased. Even in rest, there was a quietness to him now, as if some great weight had finally lifted. She didn't realize McGonagall was behind her until the headmistress spoke. "You've done something very few could have managed, Miss Granger." Hermione turned, startled. "We only did what was necessary." McGonagall's eyes softened. "Necessary, yes. But don't diminish what you accomplished. You faced the oldest darkness, not just in him, but in yourself. You let it see you, and you survived." Hermione glanced back at Draco. "We both did." McGonagall's expression turned thoughtful. "The relics are gone, but their echoes will remain. Power like that never disappears completely. The question now is, what will rise to fill the silence?" Hermione frowned. "You think something else will come?" "Magic abhors emptiness, Miss Granger. It always finds balance. Light in the shadow, shadow in the light." The older witch's voice gentled. "But perhaps, this time, balance may not be a curse." When she left, the room fell quiet again. Hermione lingered, listening to Draco's slow, steady breathing. For years, she had thought of him as a remnant of the past, a ghost of old wars, old hatreds. Now she realized how wrong she'd been. They were both remnants, both forged by what had been lost. By afternoon, he woke. His eyes fluttered open, pale grey catching the winter light. "You're still here," he murmured, voice rough from sleep. "Of course I am." she said, unable to keep the relief from her tone. He smiled faintly. I half expected you'd run back to the ministry to write 100 reports. I already sent them, she said, folding her arms. All they need now is your signature. He groaned. Then maybe I should have stayed unconscious. Hermione laughed, a sound that startled her as much as him. It had been so long since laughter had felt easy. When Madame Pomfrey declared him fit to walk, he insisted on leaving immediately. Hermione accompanied him down through the corridors. The castle was quiet, its portraits whispering greetings as they passed. They reached the courtyard where the snow lay untouched, pristine and bright. Draco paused by one of the arches, gazing out over the grounds. It feels different, he said softly, like the air's lighter. It is, Hermione replied. You broke the cycle. He looked at her, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. We did. For a while, they said nothing. The world around them was still, suspended in peace that felt almost fragile. Hermione watched as snowflakes gathered on his shoulders, softening the sharp lines of his cloak. What will you do now? She asked finally. He hesitated. I don't know. I'm not sure there's a place for me at the ministry anymore. Too many memories, too many names that still don't trust mine. Then start somewhere else, she said. You don't have to rebuild what was broken. You can build something new. He gave her a long, searching look. And you? What happens to Hermione Granger when there's no more darkness left to fight? She smiled faintly. Then she learns to live without one. The wind stirred between them, carrying the scent of snow and pine. For the first time in years, she felt no rush to fill the silence, no need to retreat into logic or lists or fear. She simply stood beside him, letting the quiet be enough. That evening they sat by the fire in the great hall. McGonagall joined them briefly, her tartan shawl trailing behind her, before retreating to her study. The hall was nearly empty, save for a few students staying for the holidays. Hermione traced her fingers along the edge of her teacup. It feels strange being here again. Everything's the same, yet not. Draco smirked. You mean it doesn't smell like battle and adrenaline anymore? Something like that. He leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. Do you remember that night during 6th year? The astronomy tower, when the sky turned red after the storm. I thought the castle would fall apart. Hermione nodded. I remember. I stood there and thought everything I believed in was already dust, but I didn't know how to stop pretending otherwise. His voice was quiet, but steady. And then you appeared after the war, arguing with everyone in the ministry, trying to change everything. You were impossible to ignore. She met his eyes, her pulse quickening. I was doing my job. He smiled faintly. And I was learning what redemption looked like. Hermione didn't answer, but warmth spread through her chest, an unfamiliar ache that was not entirely unpleasant. Outside, the snow deepened, muting the world in white. When the last of the firewood burned low, she stood. I should go. The carriages will stop running soon. Draco rose too. I'll walk you to the gates. They made their way through the courtyard in silence. The night was clear, the stars sharp against the velvet dark. When they reached the gates, Hermione turned to him. You'll write? She asked. He hesitated. Do you want me to? She smiled. I wouldn't have asked otherwise. He returned the smile, a small, uncertain curve of his lips, that held more honesty than she had ever seen in him before. "Then I will." For a long moment, neither moved. The night seemed to hold its breath. Snowflakes drifted between them, catching in her hair, melting against his cloak. Then Draco reached out, hesitating only a heartbeat before brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His hand lingered there, his voice low. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "You didn't give me much choice." He chuckled softly, the sound breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. Then, without another word, he stepped back, his expression unreadable but warm. Hermione watched him turn toward the castle, his figure growing smaller against the snow. When he vanished through the archway, she stood for a long moment, her breath misting in the cold. Something inside her felt lighter, not finished, not complete, but beginning again. She turned toward the path leading to Hogsmeade, the snow crunching softly beneath her boots. The sky above stretched wide and endless, streaked with silver light from the stars. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether peace or storm, Hermione felt for the first time in years that she could face it. Behind her, the castle glowed against the night, and from its highest tower, a faint flicker of light pulsed, steady, constant, like a heartbeat. Spring arrived reluctantly that year, creeping into the world as though uncertain it was still welcome. The snows melted into silver streams that ran through the valleys below Hogwarts, and buds broke open along the black branches of the forbidden forest. The war of ash and silver had ended, but its memory still lingered in the quiet places, in whispers of wind through stone corridors, in the scent of smoke after rain. Hermione returned to London when the thaw began. The Ministry had summoned her back. Endless meetings, reports and reassurances to a wizarding world desperate to believe its nightmares were truly gone. She stood before the Wizengamot more than once, answering questions that grew increasingly abstract. Was the magic truly contained? Could it return? Had the relics been destroyed beyond recall? Her answers were measured, factual. But every time she spoke the word destroyed, she felt a faint tremor in her chest, as though the air itself objected. Draco had stayed away. She received his letters now and then, short, precise, written in the elegant script she'd come to recognize instantly. He never spoke of the relics, or of magic, or of the night at Hogwarts. Instead, he wrote of small things. The garden outside his cottage, a kestrel nesting in the chimney, the sound of the sea. It was as if he were teaching himself to write about life instead of survival. Hermione answered each one, always carefully, always honestly. And though the words were ordinary, something quiet and steady grew between the lines. A thread of connection spun from shared silence. Still, her nights were not peaceful. She dreamed again, not of silver light or fire, but of the forest near Hogwarts, where new leaves trembled beneath starlight. In the dream, she always walked alone, and somewhere ahead of her, a faint glow flickered, soft and distant, like a candle glimpsed through mist. She never reached it, though she always woke with the strange feeling that she'd been called by name. It was late April when she saw him again. She had been leaving the Ministry after another long day when a familiar voice said, "Granger!" She turned, startled. Draco stood across the atrium, hands in his coat pockets, watching her. His hair was wind-tossed, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, pale and steady, held no trace of the turmoil she remembered. "Malfoy," she said, recovering her composure. "I thought you'd sworn off the ministry." "I have," he replied dryly. "I'm only here on sufferance. Kingsley insists I attend one final hearing to confirm my probation is officially lifted." Hermione's lips curved slightly. "And how does it feel? To be free?" He considered that. "Strange. I spent most of my life waiting for judgment. It's disorienting to realize no one's watching anymore." "Someone always is," she said softly. "You just stop caring after a while." He smiled faintly. "You haven't changed. Neither have you." "Good," he said. "I like myself better this way." They walked out together into the pale light of evening. The city hummed around them, 1,000 small, ordinary sounds. Footsteps, carriages, laughter. It felt almost miraculous, the normality of it. "Come with me," Draco said suddenly. Hermione blinked. "What?" "Not far. Just come." He led her through side streets and narrow lanes until they reached a small park near the river, where the last of the magnolias were shedding their white petals like snow. The air smelled of rain and earth. He stopped near a low stone bench and gestured toward the water. "I used to come here when I was younger," he said, "before everything. My mother liked this place. She said the river reminded her that magic isn't just in wands or spells. It's in motion, in change." Hermione watched the current, the slow glint of lamplight on its surface. She was right. He turned to her, studying her face. "Do you ever think about it? What comes next for people like us?" "Like us? The ones who survived," he said quietly. "We built a world out of ruins, but what do we do once it's standing again, when there's no battle left?" Hermione thought for a long moment. "We live," she said finally. "We forgive ourselves. We stop mistaking peace for idleness." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she admitted, "but it's worth trying." He was silent for a while, then said, "Do you still see it? The silver light?" Her pulse skipped. "Sometimes, in dreams." "I do too," he said softly. "Only now it doesn't frighten me. It feels like something waiting, not darkness, not anymore." They sat until the lamps flickered on and the first stars appeared over the city. Hermione hadn't realized how close they were until a breeze lifted her hair and brushed it against his sleeve. Neither of them moved. Finally, Draco said, "You once told me that some things are meant to be rebuilt, not resurrected." "I remember." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Maybe that's what this is. Not resurrection, just rebuilding. Something smaller, something real." The simplicity of it undid her. For years, everything in her life had been defined by struggle, by grand causes and impossible tasks. This, sitting beside him under the quiet weight of spring, felt like the first honest magic she'd known in years. When she looked up, he was still watching her. There was no tension now, no sharpness, only a question written across his face, one that needed no words. Hermione didn't step back. The kiss was brief, almost hesitant, more promise than declaration. But when they parted, the air between them felt changed, charged, but calm, like the moment after a storm when the world remembers how to breathe. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Draco said, "You know this doesn't fit into your ministry schedule." She laughed softly. "I'll make room." Always the Gryffindor. Always the survivor, she corrected. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded, a faint gleam of warmth in his eyes. Then, perhaps we both are. Weeks passed. The world moved on. Hogwarts reopened for summer term. Diagon Alley bustled with students buying early supplies. The Ministry's reports declared the magical anomalies resolved. And yet, every so often, when Hermione stood by her window at night, she would see it, a flicker of silver on the horizon, distant and faint, not threatening, but alive. She never told anyone. Some things didn't need to be explained. Sometimes Draco would visit London, always unannounced, always with that same half-smile that suggested he still didn't quite believe he belonged there. They would walk along the river, speaking of small things, books, weather, the shape of the moonlight on the water, and every so often their hands would brush, their shoulders touch, and the silence between them would stretch, soft and unbroken. In those moments, Hermione thought of everything they had endured, the wars and losses, the magic that had tried to devour them both, and felt a quiet certainty settle in her heart. Some stories didn't end in triumph or tragedy. Some simply changed form, like water finding a new riverbed. The relics were gone. The darkness had scattered. But in its place, something gentler had taken root. Not the fire of old battles, but the slow, steady warmth of a world being remade. And as spring deepened into summer, and the magnolia trees shed their last petals into the river, Hermione Granger finally began to believe what she had told him that night by the sea. That not all magic was meant to destroy, that some magic was made to heal. Summer came to England with a soft, golden persistence. The air hung thick with the scent of wildflowers and salt drifting from the distant sea. For the first time in years, the wizarding world seemed to exhale, slowly, uncertainly, as if remembering how peace was supposed to feel. Hermione Granger had moved out of her cramped London flat into a quiet cottage at the edge of Dorset. It wasn't large, but it was surrounded by trees that caught the wind like sails, their branches whispering in the evenings. Books filled every corner, and the garden, though half-tamed, had begun to bloom under her careful touch. Her days were no longer ruled by the ministry clock. She worked when she wished, consulting on ancient spellwork and helping to reform the Department of Mysteries archives. But mostly, she read and wrote and walked. Sometimes she still felt the pull of the relics in her dreams, a faint shimmer of silver on the horizon, but it no longer frightened her. It felt like a distant echo, a memory of something she had already conquered. It was a rare, quiet afternoon when she heard the soft pop of apparition outside. A moment later, Draco Malfoy appeared at the garden gate. He stood there, a tall figure against the summer light, dressed simply in a linen shirt and dark trousers. His pale hair caught the sun, and for an instant he looked almost unearthly, a remnant of the past standing in the doorway of something new. "You're late," she said, smiling as she set aside her book. He smirked. "You said after lunch. I assumed you meant civilized hours." "For some of us, that's before tea," she teased. He stepped closer, closing the gate behind him. "How domestic you've become, Granger. I half expected to find you constructing magical legislation out of daisies." "Don't tempt me," she said, laughing. "It might improve the ministry's efficiency." His gaze softened. "You look happy here." Hermione paused, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "I am. For the first time in a long while, I think I might be." They spent the afternoon in the garden, the warmth of the sun broken by drifting clouds. Draco helped her replant a patch of herb seedlings, though he grumbled incessantly about soil under his nails. And by evening they sat on the low stone wall overlooking the fields. Fireflies glimmered among the grass, tiny sparks of gold in the growing dusk. "It's strange," he said after a while. "I used to think peace would feel like a kind of silence, an emptiness, but it isn't, is it?" "No," she said. "It's quieter than chaos, but fuller somehow, like the world's humming, even when you stop listening." He nodded slowly, his profile etched against the fading light. "I still have dreams sometimes," he admitted. "Not of her, of the relics. They call, but not in words. More like a memory of being whole." Hermione turned toward him. "Maybe it isn't them calling at all. Maybe it's the part of you that learned to live through them, trying to make sense of what's left." He gave a soft laugh. "Trust you to make existential philosophy sound reassuring." "Occupational hazard," she said. They sat in companionable silence for a long time. Somewhere nearby, the sea murmured against the rocks. The stars began to prick through the darkening sky. First one, then a dozen, then a slow, glittering sweep of constellations. Hermione rested her chin on her hand. "Do you ever think about what we'll be remembered for?" Draco tilted his head. "If we're lucky, nothing at all." She glanced at him, surprised. He smiled faintly. "Legends are for people who need the world to forgive them. I don't want forgiveness anymore. I just want a life." Hermione studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then let's live it." He turned to her fully, his eyes catching the starlight. "Together?" She didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. The kiss that followed was slow, deliberate, like the sealing of a promise. Not one forged in passion or desperation, but in quiet understanding. When they parted, her heart beat steady and sure, echoing the rhythm of the sea below. For the first time since the war, she felt entirely herself. Weeks passed into months, the cottage filled with the soft rhythm of shared days, parchment rustling, laughter in the kitchen, the occasional argument about whose turn it was to fix the leaky charm on the roof. The villagers, mostly muggles, found them an odd but gentle pair. A woman with bright eyes who carried her books to the cliffs, and the pale man who followed with a wry smile and a basket of tea things. Sometimes, when the wind was right, they'd walk to the beach at night. The tide would pull away, leaving the sand strewn with shells that gleamed like fragments of moonlight. Hermione would trace her wand through the air, sketching soft trails of light, and Draco would stand beside her, pretending not to be enchanted by the sight. "Still a show-off," he'd murmur. "Still watching," she'd reply. And he would smile that quiet, private smile that belonged to no one else. The wizarding world beyond them carried on, of course. The ministry rebuilt. New laws were written. Old fears faded into history. The relics remained locked deep within the Department of Mysteries, untouched, their energy finally quiet. Scholars came and went, writing papers about the phenomenon, but none could quite agree on what had truly happened. Some called it a convergence, others a curse, and one eccentric old wizard proposed that Hermione and Draco had merely been caught in a resonance field of their own making. a collision of opposing magics that had rewritten the balance itself. Hermione read the papers once, then burned them in the hearth. "Let them argue," she said, when Draco raised an eyebrow at the ashes. "The truth belongs to those who lived it. And survived it," he added. "Especially that." Autumn came quietly, soft winds carrying the scent of apples and wood smoke. Leaves turned gold and crimson, and the days grew shorter. On the first evening of October, Hermione stood on the hill behind the cottage, watching the sunset bleed into the sea. Draco joined her, his hand brushing hers. "Do you feel it?" she asked after a while. "The change?" "Yes, like the world turning." He squeezed her hand. "It's not the world, Granger. It's us." She looked up at him, smiling faintly. "You think we've changed that much?" "I think we finally stopped running from it." The last light of day caught in his hair, turning it to pale gold. For a moment, she saw the boy he'd been, proud, frightened, lost, and the man he had become, tempered by fire and forgiveness. "You once said, 'Some things can't be rebuilt,'" he murmured. "But maybe we were wrong." Hermione leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe we were." The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the faintest echo of the past. A sigh of ash, a flicker of silver. But it was no longer a warning, no longer a shadow. It was only a memory of power that had been faced, understood, and laid to rest. Below them, the waves broke in a rhythm like a heartbeat. In that moment, with the sky blazing above, the sea murmuring below, and the warmth of his hand steady in hers, Hermione Granger finally understood what it meant to be free. Not to forget the past, nor to erase it, but to walk forward beside it, unafraid. And as twilight deepened into night, two figures stood on the edge of the world, no longer bound by darkness or prophecy, but by the quiet, enduring magic of those who had survived and chosen to begin again.